whether you are a woman who wants to work or not, I think as a mother, leaving your children is incredibly difficult. And it was this push-pull of loving what I was doing and believing in my goals and this business and this thing that I was trying to build, and also just having agony over leaving my children for hours at a time.
What would the world look like if people felt like they mattered? Welcome to the Lead with Love podcast, exploring what it means to lead with love in business and life. I'm your host, Jada Selner, and in this show, I'll share meaningful conversations to help you, the creative, the entrepreneur, the world changer, reach more people, go after your dreams, and serve your community with love. I appreciate you joining me. Now, let's get cozy and start today's episode. Welcome, welcome. Oh my goodness. It has been over a year since She Builds has made it out into the wild, and over a year since the last episode of the Lead with Love podcast. And if you've ever found yourself juggling motherhood as an entrepreneur, you'll feel less alone in today's conversation because I talk to published author and life coach Andrea Owen, who shares her own journey of what it has looked like to balance being a parent, building a business, and writing books. And we explore the push and the pull between loving what you do while also navigating being a caregiver in your home. And even if you are not a caregiver for children, this episode will still be resonant for you because you might be caregiving loved ones, could be aging parents, could be caregiving your own chronic illness. So many ways where we're having to juggle our time between the many hats that we wear and the roles that we have in our lives. So I'm really excited for you to dive into this. And speaking of books, I am so excited just to celebrate that She Builds is making its way around the world. And if you're a podcast listener, you're probably an audio listener of books like me. So if you head over to shebuilds.com/audible, you can get an audio version there. And if you love She Builds, will you please gift it? This is the perfect time of year to do that. And if you really, really love it, I would so appreciate it if you left a review at shebuilds.com/review. Feel free to take a screenshot, send it to me in a DM on social media at Jada Selner. I'd love to just express my gratitude and big thank yous. And it truly is the most helpful thing you can do to inspire more people to build an anti-hustle business and life. And before we dive into today's episode, I've just been tapping into the collective, and I know that people are exhausted. I'm having conversations with my clients and close friends, and I see that there is a desire for deep rest and recovery from a very full year. I just did a vision workshop in person at my creative studio, which I need to tell you all about. I'll save that for a different episode. And I also did one online to reach more people who could do the vision workshop in their jammies, no bra on, but really stepping into how do we build an anti-hustle vision for our lives. And we have to be, one, self-aware, and also have to be intentional of how we want to feel and what we want to say yes to and no to, and allowing our anti-hustle vision to be a compass for us. So what I feel is that in this collective exhaustion, collective burnout, it makes sense. So be really compassionate and kind with yourself if you are in a season of exhaustion. Even though in my book, I talk about burnout is not an option, it's going to happen. And it's us being able to shorten the gap between when it does happen and how do we restore and rest versus going until we burn out so hard that we want to burn everything down and shut it all down, because I don't want us to be resentful of our businesses where we don't want to show up for it anymore. And it makes sense that we are in this season of exhaustion because we've been so excited to gather with our loved ones again. Live events are happening, but that also made for an extra social, overly committed season with a lot of activities where we're really showing up, getting dressed out of our homes. And so we are rallying to show up for our businesses. We're rallying to show up for our families, but most likely we didn't rally to show up for ourselves. And maybe you got sick and it was forced rest, not intentional, guilt-free rest. So then you need a vacation from your vacation. And so what I want to say is that you don't have to stay in a feeling of guilt if you are in a season of exhaustion, overwhelm. What I know is building an anti-hustle business and life is a practice. It's not a quick fix. So it's typical for us to have these push seasons, but that also means we need those pause seasons of rest. And I cover these topics in my book in chapter 11, Refill Your Well, all about identifying your self-care style and your self-care menu. And in chapter 12, Embrace Your Pace, and just knowing what season you're in. Are you in a push season, pivot, pause, all of that, right? And sometimes when we're in this season of exhaustion, a bubble bath or massage or one night of TV shows will not work. You need a longer break to restore your energy again, so you don't resent your business that you have built. And I've been inviting my own clients to communicate with their teams that they will unplug from work, giving themselves full days to ground and recenter before rushing back in to their lives and busyness. So this time of year is a really good time to find where you can create some margin in your life. And I know I'm going to be doing that, unplugging from work, pausing on the different social media posts, and just kind of batching and getting all of that stuff in place so I can really hit that autoresponder reply email and just say, I'll get back to you in the new year, and give yourself that extra week in January. Sometimes we go right back in. It's really helpful to, even if you're back in work mode, to not go into correspondence and communication mode. So if you have the privilege to give yourself those extra days, I highly encourage that you do it. And that's why I'm so excited for you to meet Andrea, who is juggling motherhood and being her own boss as a seasoned entrepreneur. And just a little bit of background for Andrea. She's an author, global speaker, and a professional certified life coach who helps high achieving women, maximize unshakable confidence and master resilience. She has taught hundreds of thousands of women tools and strategies to be able to empower themselves to live their most kick-ass life. She's also a certified Daring Way facilitator, which is the modality based on the research of Dr. Brené Brown, who I love and adore her body of work so much. Andrea is also the host of Make Some Noise podcast with over 3 million downloads. I had an opportunity to be a guest on her show, so I will link to that episode in the show notes. Just head over to jadasellner.com/podcast and you'll be able to find the episode show notes there. Andrea is the proud author of 3 books, which have been translated into 18 languages and are available in 22 countries. And she updated and revised her book, How to Stop Feeling Like Shit. So definitely go check that out. And fun fact, Andrea is also a retired roller derby player, having skated under the name Veronica Vane. I just think that is so fun. So now let's get cozy with Andrea. Hi, Andrea.
Hi, I'm so glad to be here.
I'm happy that we're here having this conversation. We just recently had a conversation on your podcast.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. So I will definitely link to the show notes. Can you tell everyone who's listening the name of your podcast? Because I know it's had evolutions and
yeah. The name changed last year. So it's Make Some Noise with Andrea Owen.
What was your intention in making that shift? I know you have a book by that title, but just curious for you how that, because I think people get afraid, they get comfortable and they have a brand and they're known for it. I'm just curious for you what that process was like for you and also kind of the intention behind making that shift.
So I was Your Kick-Ass Life from 2010. That was the name of my business. And I had the URL, yourkickasslife.com. And it still redirects. I still have it. But then when it came time for my third book to come out, I honestly just kind of wanted a change. And Your Kick-Ass Life just felt a little bit dated. Like at the time in 2010, it was a big deal. Like it was new and nobody was really had that kind of brand. And so I just felt like it had kind of run its course. And also the book, my third book was called Make Some Noise. And it seemed very much in alignment with my brand and who I am and what I'm about. So that's why I made the shift over to that one. And it's also, listen to this, because of the word ass, I had to mark every single episode as explicit in not iTunes anymore, Apple Podcasts.
Yeah.
I had to mark every single one as explicit. Isn't that annoying?
Yes. And you know what I love that you just said iTunes, Apple, giving us permission to shift, change, evolve. iTunes is like, we're not iTunes anymore. We're Apple Podcasts. They're a big billion-dollar brand and they can pivot and change course and redefine, rename themselves. And it's okay. I'm curious how did your community respond to that shift or change? Did you feel like have any bumps behind the scenes or with your community of like, wait, no,
literally no one. And if they did, I didn't hear about it. Like I didn't make a big deal about it. I mentioned it, of course, like several times on the podcast, just to give people a heads up, but I didn't have like a big hoopla of like, because I didn't change my website. Like I didn't have a brand new website at the time. I just changed the URL. And so now it's just AndreaOwen.com. So yeah, no, it was a non-event. It was uneventful.
I love it. Yeah. And just to give people a little background, I mean, we have actually never met in real life before.
I know, that surprises me.
Yeah. And did we meet each other in Rockstar 100 or, it was Rockstar 100. Now it's Rockstar 250.
And because we share a mutual friend who's a good friend to both of us in Amy Ehlers.
Yes.
And I think maybe that's why we think that we are better friends or that we've met each other because we're both close to Amy. I don't know.
I think it's so true. It's so true. Because I hear about you through Amy.
And I hear about you through Amy.
Yes. So Amy, we love you for being, a matchmaker. Yes. That's amazing. Well, I'm super excited to dive in also. So you have 3 books, Your Kick-Ass Life, Stop Feeling Like Shit, and Make Some Noise.
My first book was called 52 Ways to Live a Kick-Ass Life. Close.
Yes. Yeah. That's right. You know what? It's like, because all I'm seeing on the cover is Kick-Ass Life. Right. But there is
yeah. People who get hung up on book titles and program names, just don't. People will get it wrong. But as long as I get the gist, I'm like, that's fine. Close enough.
Right. Because on your book cover, at least the one that I see, 52 Ways to Live is in a different font and a different color. Yeah. So
you're right.
Awesome. Very cool. So before we dive in, because I am curious just about your author journey, I know we also want to talk about some other pieces around highly sensitive people and ADD and as entrepreneurs, all of that, which I'm really excited to dive in. But before, I would just love to ask you, what does leading with love mean to you? And how do you put love into practice in your business, the way that you show up in your work or in your life, whatever's feeling most alive for you in this moment? Because this question and answer can shift and change as we do.
Yeah. I love this question so much, Shada. And of course you would ask it, but I love it because when I first started my business and when I was younger, You asking me that question would have just sent me down. Like, I would have been like, I don't know how to answer this. I don't lead with love. Like I lead with productivity. And I think that personality tests can be incredibly helpful, or, quizzes like HSP and things like that, just to be able to get to know yourself. And so I'm an 8 on the Enneagram. And for people who aren't familiar, that's the challenger. And so Chelsea Handler is also an 8, if that gives you any indication of what kind of person. And also I took the DISC assessment, which I guess is really popular in like corporate America. Mm-hmm. And I'm a high D, high I. And so I remember one thing that the coach said to me that made me kind of laugh uncomfortably is she said, people that are high D, high I put productivity and efficiency before relationships. And I was like, oopsies. Which can be fantastic. Like we make great leaders. We don't make great managers, but, and we make great entrepreneurs. But when it comes to relationships, I have had to put an extra effort and extra attention into nurturing those relationships. And this is also outside of business as well. It's like with my best friend, with my colleagues, in my marriage. And so the reason that I kind of am taking you on this detour is because like love isn't my go-to. Like, of course, I'm not a sociopath. Like, of course I love people and I allow them to love me back, but it's not my go-to. But like, speaking of Amy Ehlers, like if I had to describe her, like one of the first things that would come out of my mouth is she is the most loving, kind, nurturing souls I've ever met. I would say the same about you, even though I've never met you in person. People wouldn't describe me as that. Like, and it's not to say, I don't think they would say like, oh, she's a real bitch. Like, I think they would say like, she's super happy and like enthusiastic and like she gets stuff done and I can always count on her. She's reliable, but love is not my go-to. And so how I lead with love, I do have an answer though, is, and this is something I've had to learn, is intentional kindness. Because I come from a legacy of very strong women. My maternal grandmother had 11 children and was largely on her own. She had 10 of them at home. My mom was a single mom in the 1960s when that was not really a thing. She left her abusive husband. And so just like, they kind of like hard as nails type of women, just like pick yourself up and dust yourself off, and like not a lot of compassion. Like my mom loved the hell out of me, but like not a lot of compassion. So I say that because it is definitely an attribute that I have had to learn how to not only give it, but also receive it. And kindness has been that window that I've walked into, has been the entry point of just slowing down, choosing my words very carefully, taking responsibility for where I have maybe hurt someone or any kind of mess that I've had to clean up. Like that is sort of my way that I love people and love my relationships and also love myself.
Yeah. And I just want to say, I love the detour. I love that you would say before you leading with productivity, like there's the podcast, lead with productivity. But I think it's important.
I would listen to that.
Yeah. A lot of people can relate to that. So I love the detour of how we got here. And I'm curious if there is a specific moment when you practiced intentional kindness, and maybe in like the earlier stages when it was a little bit more bumpy, uncomfortable for you to put into practice because that wasn't your natural way to respond.
Yeah. The thing that immediately popped into my mind was early on, this was probably around 2012 or so. My very best friend, her name's Amy Smith. She's also good friends with Amy Ehlers. She and I decided to do a joint venture together. I don't know if they even call them that anymore, but that's what we used to call them. And we made a video called Shit Life Coaches Say, like that actually is like done pretty well on YouTube. Like we had so much fun. But also like when you do a project with someone, it's business. At the end of the day, it's business. And you have to think about logistics and splitting up the duties and things like that. And so it got to be where some stuff came up and she was feeling hurt about something and I had no idea about it. She was covering it up really well. So she finally had to come to me and we had a hard conversation. And it was honestly the first time where I've had, and I want to give her credit for this, someone showing me like how you can show up to a conversation and say like, hey, you hurt me. Like, I know you didn't intend it. I know you had no idea that this is what you were doing, but this is how it showed up for me. And I want to give you an opportunity to clean it up. And it was the first time I didn't get defensive. I was, she was so generous with how she approached it. I was so grateful that she was kind with how she delivered it. And it was really the first time that I had had a female friendship where we didn't get into an argument. Like we didn't get defensive. We didn't get accusatory. And it was just met with so much kindness. And it was incredibly uncomfortable. I'm not going to say that it wasn't. It was incredibly uncomfortable for both of us. And there were a lot of tears but it really solidified our friendship and allowed us to get to know each other and also allowed me to see, any kind of like red flags to watch out for and how to do things differently. And I'm just was so grateful that she gave me the opportunity to clean it up instead of not saying anything, and then she's later resentful towards me,
Yeah.
But I'm still like clueless, and because that's oftentimes how it goes.
Yeah. Yes, totally. You know what I love about that is that your friend Amy was leading with intentional kindness first. So there's a lot of self-awareness, compassion, patience, slowing it down, because when we get hurt, we either shut down and build the resentment up, or we get mad. And so the way that hey, I'm like, you hurt me, it's the approach, even if it's like, hey, this is the impact it had, but it comes from that place that still puts you in defense or fight or flight. So it was, I love that. And also, I'm going to link to our podcast interview on your show. I'm just having this intuitive hit. I mean, if you plan on writing more books, I don't know if that's your path or not, but we talked a lot about friendships and hard conversations. And I'm like, you have many of these. And I don't know, I could just see a book in your world where it's talking about friendships and hard conversations and relationships. And I think that's even just the story that you're sharing of like leading with productivity and fun and all of that. So I'm just planting a little seed that would be really fun.
Maybe. Yeah, I do plan on writing more books and I'm going to put that in my back pocket. I appreciate it.
Amazing. So how long have you been an entrepreneur running your own body of work in the world? Because I feel you are a seasoned entrepreneur. So I'm just curious what your timeline is.
Yeah, I guess I am. So I started coaching, casually. I was going to say like not professionally, but like I was trying to be as professional as I could. But I mean, like I hadn't, opened up a business checking account or didn't have a website yet. So in 2007, so I formally started and like checked off all the boxes in terms of starting a business in 2010. And so, yeah, it's been 12 years, just past 12 years.
And I love that there was this like 3-year transition window, right? Of the casual coaching to like, I'm a coach. I've got a bank account. I've got a website.
Right. I have my own debit card.
Yeah.
I was having babies. I had a baby in 2007 and another one in 2009. So I was super busy building babies and businesses.
So what was that like? Because that means you chose to work for yourself while also growing, raising, chasing tiny people. So were they the inspiration for you? Like, I'm just curious what that transition into coaching while also juggling motherhood.
It was tough. I mean, I'm not going to lie. Like, no, they weren't really the inspiration. I know a lot of people, or a lot of mothers, I should say, like want to work for themselves so they can have a lot of flexibility and work from home. And that was all advantages that were sort of secondary for me. Like that was just a bonus. I wanted to work for myself because I do not handle authority very well. Big surprise, telling you my personality.
Challenger.
I'd been written up for insubordination a couple of times when I was younger. I would push back on things that I didn't think were fair, whether they happened to me or whether they happened to one of my coworkers. I would point things out when I saw that they weren't being handled or managed well. Like, not that I had a solution at that age, but I just was like, I think this sucks, and that doesn't bode very well in corporate America, or at least not at the time. I know things have changed a lot. And in the jobs that I had, I actually, many, many years ago, I got my associate's degree in fashion merchandising and got a job as an assistant buyer for a chain of very successful and popular surf shops that were in Southern California. They don't exist anymore, but at the time, it very much was kind of like the movie The Devil Wears Prada, but in the surf industry. And it was the job that like so many girls from my school would have loved to have had. And I landed it. But I looked at the people who were ahead of me, like the buyers who'd been there for a long time, who made six figures. And like, that's what I would eventually get promoted to do and aspired to be. And I looked at their lives and I didn't want anything to do with that. Like, I'm like, you guys work your asses off. I don't think you get paid enough for the amount of hours that you work. I certainly wasn't getting paid enough. I made $27,000 a year and I was working probably 60 hours a week. And I just didn't want it. I knew I wanted to, like get married and have kids someday. And I'm like, I don't want to be working until 7:00 at night. Like, I want to have a life. So I had a sinking feeling that corporate America wasn't for me. And I didn't know what to do. And I'm like, maybe I'll just like be a trophy wife. And like, honestly, I thought about that too. I'm like, who did I go to school with that's rich that might want to marry me? But so it sort of just serendipitously, or maybe not serendipitously, fell into my lap. But I mean, the long and short of it is that I was built for entrepreneurship, even if it was just for the reason of I needed to be my own boss.
Yeah. And I've had those wishes and desires too, of like, can I just stay at home and just not work? Yeah. I remember maternity leave, because I worked corporate, but I worked for an educational theater program through Kaiser Permanente. And everyone was like, oh, you're going to be so excited to come back to work and to get a break. And I had a 4-month maternity leave and I loved it because I was like, oh, I can wake up, but then nurse, and then we get to sleep until 10 a.m. And then go walk to a coffee shop with a friend. And I was loving that stay at home life of like, go to a music class, do this. So I didn't last.
Yes.
Yeah. Yes. Totally.
I loved that part. Because I had two, and when they were toddlers, I was like, get me out of here. Like, this is not. And that was I don't know if it was hard for you, but like, it was hard for me to sort of rumble with the notion that I always thought being a stay-at-home mother would be the ultimate fulfillment. And I was envious of women who, or at least I thought that they felt that way. And I had to really come to terms with and understand that just because I wanted to work didn't have anything to do with how I felt about my children. It was only the job that I didn't like of being a stay-at-home mother. I didn't want to clean. If I could have been a stay-at-home mom and had a housekeeper, I think I would have been okay. Oh God, it just was so boring to me. And I missed talking to people and having adult conversations so badly. And I had so much guilt over it that I really had to work through.
It's interesting because I consider myself a social introvert, but I became more extroverted, more social as a mom. So I was starting moms groups. I was doing all kinds of things to talk to other humans. But then it was like, I lived in LA and people have kids a lot later in LA, and I was like 24. So I'm like, who are the cool young hip moms with tattoos that have kids? And, it was a really, just trying to find your people. But I'm curious for you. So you knew that you had to like be your own boss. You did it. But what was it like navigating that while having 2 little ones in tow? Because many people, they will start their businesses and then they don't have kids yet. And so then they're afraid to have kids because that's going to, interfere with their business. But for me, my daughter was 18 months old when I started my first brick and mortar business. So it's a different navigation of working for yourself and raising kids. How was that experience for you? I mean, I know you said it was challenging.
It was so hard. Yeah. And I don't want to sort of put a silver lining on it and just be like, it was hard, but also it was so great. Like it was hard. It was so hard because I didn't know what I was doing. Like I didn't have an MBA. I have a degree in exercise physiology. So it was like my job didn't have anything to do with the carbon cycle. So it was so tricky to learn how to, and also, so this was like the whole concept of being a service provider online was still fairly new. Like the only people I think, like I didn't know you yet. And I think I maybe had heard of Sarah Jenks. Like, and Sarah only had maybe a couple years on me, her and Nisha. But like Marie Forleo had just started, Gabby Bernstein had like written her first book, and Danielle Laporte, like that was it. That was it. That was the pool of women who were already established. And even they only had like a handful of years established. Didn't they? Like, wasn't like they had a decade behind them of being coaches and consultants online.
So most were not moms at that time, or are still
true.
not moms. So were you looking towards them for inspiration, or like what was, how were you navigating that?
But I also knew, I had someone who had started at the same time as me. And she said, those of us that are doing this with toddlers, it's like dog years for us. And I was like, oh. She wasn't entirely wrong. But it also, I'm an Aries. And so I'm highly competitive. And even then I realized like, I'm totally making up like what's going on in their business, but I used it as fuel. I'm like, okay, this is my marker, like I need to get to here. I need to get to there. And it worked for a while, and it was helpful in my success. And
what were the markers that you were looking at?
So it was things like, okay, like I wanted to build my list to like 1,000. Like that was like one of the first markers. And I wanted to have 100 blog posts written. I wanted to get to, 500 likes on Facebook. This was like, when Facebook pages were brand new. Instagram wasn't even out yet, but like, it was like these small markers. And I wanted to have, 6 clients for me was a full practice because, I had these 2 small children and childcare was tricky. So it was so fun though. Like, I don't know if you remember that time. It's like, we were all just making it up. Like,
yeah, we were online business babies, like Muppet babies. That was us.
It was fun. And I was just,
it was fun.
Like, I had this delusional confidence because I didn't have any evidence of failure. Like I didn't know anyone who had done this before me where it didn't work out. So I miss that so much, like the beauty of that. I'm just like, of course it's going to work out.
I love that. One, I just want to highlight and underline that your markers, I was expecting you were like 6 figures.
No.
100,000 Facebook. I love that they were like mini markers of, the metrics for you. And they were not that they were all things you could control, but you could aim for. 500 likes, 100 blog posts, 6 clients. I just love that there was like that baseline.
Yeah.
I don't know, feels like you could succeed versus most of us are like, go from, nothing to 6 figures. Then once you hit 6 figures, then you're like a multiple 6 figures to then I need to 10x and make $1 million in the next year or bust.
I've been down that road. It's not for me, but I still have my vision board, like my very first vision board. And I was still nursing my daughter. And on that vision board is 60K. Like I wanted to make 60K because that to me, A, was the most money I had ever made. And B, it felt so rich at that time. Mm-hmm. And I'll tell you what, like when I did it, I felt like it was $1 million. Like it just, and that was revenue too. Like PS everybody, like that was not my profit.
Yeah. not after taxes are taken out 30%. We're not doing that math.
Childcare. Right. After $59,000 a year in childcare. But I also, I had a VA at the time but I've kept that. It's on like a piece of cardboard and it's a picture of me and my youngest. And it's just, that was so much easier than these gigantic goals.
I love that. And I still have my vision board. Mine was 15K a month because I live in California. I ran the numbers of like giving back. health insurance, all the things, and the taxes. I did remove the taxes because I'm like, I want 10K take home. But I have the same thing on my vision board. And that is still, I talk about this in my book in chapter 2, like, what's your enough number? To this day, like that 15K per month is still like my enough number.
Yeah.
Even
I love
if
that.
things are surplus. And I just love knowing that. So it's easy for me to scale back, to not do as much and know I just need to hit this base and I'm in a good place of still thriving.
I'm so glad we're having this conversation because I remember when a couple of years ago, maybe it was more than that, but the whole conversation of generational wealth was happening and I panicked. I was like, okay, is this our new marker? Like, like, okay, we're past like the multi-million-dollar mark that we need to do in our businesses as mothers. And now we have to set up our children and their children for life. That's honestly like, I'm going to say a bad word, everybody, but that's honestly when I was like, fuck this. Like, I'm done. I'm out. No, those aren't my goals. And, you know, some people might say like, oh, she has money blocks. And like,
You're saying the thing though, those aren't my goals. Like if we could really think about for people who create these markers, create these goals, are they your goals or someone else is imposing that through their marketing and positioning of, you know, building generational wealth? And if that is your goal, then like go
Hats
down
off
that
to you.
rabbit hole, you know, but I think that's really beautiful that you're like, I'm tapping out.
Yeah.
Nope. If this is it.
And to be fair and kind, you know, I think I first started hearing it from a woman of color who that was her goal because she was part of a marginalized community where, you know, traditionally that was definitely not something that, I mean, especially for a Black woman to have that be her goal. So my hat is absolutely off to you. Like, if that's your goal, like I will help you any way that I can. You can climb on my back to get there. But for me, you know, and I'm speaking like as a white woman with enormous amounts of privilege, like my husband, you know, when I started my business, I was married. He had a steady paycheck. We had health insurance. We also lived in California at the time. And that was when health insurance was different, when we could actually afford it. But like, it just wasn't for me. And it didn't actually take me long to come to that conclusion. And I, like you said, I tapped out.
Yeah. So you mentioned childcare was challenging in the beginning. So I'm just curious, how did you navigate that so you could get to the 6, you know, coaching clients?
Yeah, I found a neighbor that didn't live too far from me who ran a home daycare. And, you know, we looked at preschools and I agonized. I cried so much about this. And I think that that's fairly normal. Whether you are a woman who wants to work or not, I think as a mother, leaving your children is incredibly difficult. And it was this push-pull of loving what I was doing and believing in my goals and this business and this thing that I was trying to build. And also just having agony over leaving my children for hours at a time. And it was only maybe like 4 hours at a time. My son wasn't as hard. He's my older one. He just has always been independent and hasn't needed me as much as my daughter. And she's the one I nursed for 2.5 years. And she just, even still, she's 13 and she's still like, if she could sleep with us every night, she would. Like if our bed was big enough. She's just that type of child. And I love her for it. And I definitely felt it when she was very, very small and I had to leave her. But it was really hard. I'm not going to lie. But then, you know, and then we moved to a different state and then found a preschool and she really loved her preschool teacher. So that ended up being better, but it just got easier and easier and better, like as the months passed. And I just had to keep persevering and leaning on people who I knew were in my corner. Because I got some people who said, you shouldn't be working.
Yeah. Yeah. Either way, it feels from society, someone's thinking you're not doing it right. And so that can contribute to some of the guilt of the right way or the wrong way. For me, I'm like, oh, I don't want to be at my office. Like everyone said I should want to have a break from my kid. And I don't, you know, obviously she was a baby, but when she hit toddler years, because my kid is like, I was reading books like Strong-Willed Child and like hug therapy and just like, you know, very intense clear what she wants, energy. But like my husband had 2 windows to have another baby with me. And it was like when she was like 9 months, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm an amazing mom. This is great. I can keep doing this. And then after toddler, I was like, nope, like she's tearing books from the bookshelves.
Yeah.
And then when she was in kindergarten, and now there was like this, my windows are so small. So we didn't like tap in at that time. I'm like, I am so happy with one kid. So it's just an interesting, how we navigate. Should we, shouldn't we? It's like a double dutch of how our kids should be cared for as we are also building, our businesses and our careers. So yeah. So you kind of officially, got your debit card in 2012, but you have since then written 3 published books. So I'm curious, when did that marker come into your field of, I'm going to write a book? How did you get there?
So I got sober in 2011, and I am what they call a high bottom alcoholic, meaning that like I didn't have a rock bottom in terms of my drinking. At the time, I was a wine drinker and just, drink like a bottle of wine by myself every night, and then realized very quickly, because I have a family history of addiction and alcohol abuse, I was like, okay, my gut was telling me exactly where I was going, and it wasn't in a good direction. And so I tried to moderate. I'm like, I can just cut back, quickly realized like I can't. And it's just misery for me. So I knew I had to abstain. So I got sober, and I didn't go to rehab, but I did start going to 12-step meetings and met some really great people and found so much love and support there. And then not long after that, I just sat up in bed one day and turned to my husband and said, I'm going to write a book. And he was like, okay. Like I was always saying things like that, but I wanted to write a book since I was 11. Like I devoured, and I wish I could tell you I was one of those people who read like Anne of Green Gables and Little Women and all these like literature classics. I was eyeball deep in Sweet Valley High. Like,
of course, all the
Francie
drama,
Pascal, Judy Blume, like all of those authors, those women authors I really looked up to. And I knew I wasn't like fiction wasn't what I was interested in. And, there I found myself in the field of personal development. And I was like, I don't know what it's going to be called. And I'm not even actually sure what it's going to be about. I just know that I need to do it. And so I started writing it. And then I also started blogging about it, about just like the journey of writing the book and how scared I was and how I didn't know what I was doing. And I was doing it anyway, just sort of like as inspiration for my followers. And a publisher found my blog post. Like, I don't know how. She was an editor at a small publishing house, and she emailed me. And at first I thought it was like a scam. And so I forwarded it to a friend of mine who'd been traditionally published. I knew one person who'd been traditionally published, and she's like, no, this isn't a scam. They're legit. And then I quickly got an agent, and we signed a deal with, it happened very fast. And that's how I got started. I mean, that was in 2012 that I signed that deal. And I didn't, my advance was $8,000. Like I didn't care about any of that. I just wanted my foot in the door in traditional publishing. Like that's all I really cared about at that time. And it was a great thing to care about, because like, look where I am now.
Yeah. So, and that was 52 Ways to Live a Kick-Ass Life,
was 52 Ways to Live a Kick-Ass Life. Yep.
And I love the transparency of like, give me the 8,000, like, and run with it and just get in the door. Even in this, the second book for me, my publishers aren't listening, but I would have taken $5. I wanted like funding. I feel like book publishers are like investors in ideas.
They are.
And they're like, hey, we're willing to take the cost of what it costs to put, assemble a book and have all the team and all the behind the scenes behind it. So I love that you weren't, because that's another marker. It's like, if I don't get 6 figures, I'm not going to take a book deal. Like, no, thank you. Not worth it. So I love that you did that. And then so that was, when did it actually publish? So you got the deal in 2012, and then it published it came out, pub date was like January 1st, 2014, but it actually came out in November of 2013. Oh, nice. Mm-hmm. So you moved pretty fast. I mean, yeah. Then you wrote your second book, How to Stop Feeling Like Shit, right? And what was the pathway from 52 Ways to Live a Kick-Ass Life to that you knew you're like, okay, I want to write a second book? So 52 Ways did well enough. I mean, it wasn't like a runaway hit or anything like that, but it did well enough to warrant a second book deal. And so my agent was like, whenever you're ready, let me know. And
I finally got an idea to write a book. I went and got certified in Brene Brown's work in 2014, which sort of sent me down this path of work where I knew I needed to talk about how shame is like the underlying driver in many of our lives. And by our, I mean women. And so I also knew it was a heavy topic. So like, how can I lighten this up? And it's just how I talk. And I came to my agent and I was like, what do you think of this title? How to Stop Feeling Like Shit? Like no one's written it yet. And I would love to publish it. I am married to this title. And they were like, yes, we love it. Let's go for it. And I got $40,000 for that. And so that was in, let's see, we signed that. It was either late 2015 or early 2016, because I took the entire year of 2016 to write it. And I mean, even $40,000, like I was like, are you kidding me? Like, you guys have that much money to give me?
I love it. I love it.
I was over the moon. And that book has done phenomenally well. That's the one that sold. I think we're close to 300,000 copies. Now we're in 19 foreign translations. It's in 22 countries, 23 countries now. So that book has been really amazing.
And you're repubbing it, right?
That's the one that's, yes, we have revised and updated it because it came out in 2018, but then, you know, we had the Me Too movement in 2017. We had so much social unrest and the 2016 election and the global pandemic. Like there's some major things that have happened since it came out. And also like the conversation around toxic positivity that I wasn't talking about yet when that book came out. So I wanted to mention all of those things as it had to do with that book. And so we approached them last year, maybe the year before, about revising and updating it. And they said, yes. So here we are.
That's amazing because I think often we think, oh, I'm not going to be able to shift, change, revise, update, upgrade based on my beliefs or as I deepen as an author, because you could just write another book, right? And do that in that way. But you're like, no, I want to kind of clean some things up in this book that is already doing well, that it has traction and wanting to make some shifts and take some ownership and really speak to some of those pieces that weren't acknowledged previously.
Right. Traditionally publishing, that's very hard. And to be honest with you, the reason that they said yes was because we already had evidence that people like this book and they're going to buy it. The publisher is not going to sink money into a project of a book that just kind of did okay or that's 10 years old. You know what I mean? Like if they're not, if it's not still selling, they're probably going to say no. But because that book had done so well and was still continuing to sell, they said yes. And I got a little bit of an advance for that. And they just changed the color of the cover. It's been interesting. Like I'm not treating it as I would a brand new book coming out. Like we are having some hoopla, but it's been a first time, you know, for me. And I think, I don't know if my agent's ever done a revision and re-release, but I'm excited for it. I am really excited.
And I do want to come back to that book in a second, but then you wrote Make Some Noise. That's your most recent book. And what was the timeline for that? So 2016, How to Stop Feeling Like Shit. And then you have Make Some Noise. What was the...
Yeah. So 2016, I wrote How to Stop Feeling Like Shit. It came out in January of 2018. And then I did the proposal for Make Some Noise, which originally on my proposal was supposed to be called Raise Hell, which between you and me and your listeners, I still like that title better. But that's how traditional publishing goes, is you have to give and take. So I signed that deal. So I had lunch with my editor March 7th of 2020. So that was, and I was in Manhattan. So it was when people were very nervous, like COVID-19 was all over the news, but nothing had really closed down yet. Like that week, they were just starting to talk about closing down schools. And then the following week was when they did. So I signed my contract right during that time. So I ended up writing the book all of 2020 and it came out in the summer of 2021. So it was a COVID baby.
Yes. Yes. So you have these 3 books, and what would you say anything that bubbles up of writing these books as that were challenging or lessons that you took away? What was the most fun? Anything that was unique, different, just whatever feels like most alive for you to share around the book writing process?
I don't know if this has been your experience, but I find that writing the book is actually the easy and fun part. And it's not always easy and fun. Like, trust me, there are days where I'm like, I'm terrible at this and I'm never going to finish this book on time. And I want to scrap everything and like just hide in my bed. But for the most part, it's fun and I love it. It's the marketing of the book. It's the selling of the book. It's all of the logistics and the minutia that go into a book launch that is, for me, the hard part. I'm not a natural marketer. I think that there are people like, I'm a really great leader. I'm really great at having conversations with people. I'm very enthusiastic and social, but marketing doesn't come naturally to me. It's like remembering to post on social media all the time. It's like, I want to do it just when I feel like it.
Yeah.
Which is not every day. And that's not how marketing works. So that part has been hard for me and something I've had to kind of like lead myself by the leash, if you will.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's just kind of the truth of it for me. Is that how it was with you?
Yeah. Well, I'm in the marketing of She Builds right now. And yeah, it's my least favorite part because there's so many moving pieces, logistics, review the graphics and this, order that, there's just so many decisions and show up to record podcast interviews and then having to like review, edit marketing assets and then publish it and share it. Like, I think a lesson I've learned in this season is I need more support. I have an amazing right hand who's on it, but I just need more. I probably need a copywriter. Yeah. She's been doing a lot of writing, but I just need more. And I need like a dedicated social media person, those type of things, like the things that I don't love. Like I love recording podcast interviews, being in conversation with people, but yeah, the end.
I get it. Same.
So what do you feel when you did market How to Stop Feeling Like Shit? If like that was kind of getting the traction and momentum, what do you feel that you did really well in that season of kind of giving it the momentum and the push that it needed to spread?
I think the advantage that I had there was because I started my own podcast in 2013, I understood the power of podcasting and the power of the podcast tour. And so I knew going into, and when I had my first book come out, that wasn't really a thing yet. Like we did other ways of marketing. That was like, blogging was still really sort of the marketing method du jour, if you will. But when I was walking into 2018, when it was about to come out, when How to Stop Feeling Like Shit was about to come out, I knew that the podcast tour was going to move copies. I knew it. And the publisher wasn't convinced. I showed them.
How many podcasts did you do?
I did 99 podcasts just in the first 3 months.
I love it.
And the reason I said it was an advantage was that wasn't as saturated as it is now. Like people quickly caught on that the way to promote their business or sell their book or sell their product or whatever was to get on people's podcasts. When my last book came out in 2021, we had a much harder time getting me on shows than we did for the previous book.
Yeah. Yes. So do you think that it's more on making sure that you have the relationships, kind of nurturing, building those so that it is easier to get on more podcasts?
Yeah, I think that's part of it. And also, making sure your pitch is really great, which I think we do have a good pitch, and making sure that you pitch with enough lead time, like don't wait until the last minute. There's a lot of different variables that go into getting on a lot of shows, but at the end of the day, the market is more saturated and it's a little bit harder to get. Like I did not get on nearly that many shows for this last time.
Yeah. How many would you say that you did?
I don't know. I would have to ask Emily. She's my right-hand woman. I would say
I'll have
probably
Michelle
about half.
Ask Emily.
Yeah. I love her. She's been with me 10 years. Last month, it was 10 years.
Oh, that's amazing.
She started out as my VA,
Michelle's...
moved into an OBM, and she's been my everything.
Yeah. I'm like, everyone needs a Michelle. I've had Michelle for 7 years and I'm just like, you need that right-hand person.
Don't ever leave me. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Just a little bit of codependency.
Right.
I know. So something that you mentioned with me as we're kind of closing this conversation that I did want to bring in, you shared that you recently officially got diagnosed for is ADD or ADHD? I always get.
I think, I know that they use the terms interchangeably because for women, a lot of times the hyperactivity is in our mind, not actually through our actions. So yeah. both.
Wow. 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 That's really a helpful distinction to hear.
That's what my doctor told me.
Mm-hmm. In the mind. So can you just talk a little bit about that and how it's impacted you and showing up in your work and how you have supported yourself with having the awareness of it?
Yeah. So what came about my diagnosis was because my daughter actually got diagnosed. We thought she had a learning disability. She just really struggled in school, but she didn't kind of fit the bill for ADHD. So like she didn't act out. She was never in trouble in class. Like she followed the rules and she was not hyperactive. So I never even thought about it. So when we went to have her evaluated and it came back with an ADHD diagnosis, my husband and I were so surprised. And then when the woman was describing it, how it shows up in girls, I was only half listening about my daughter because I was like, oh my God, you're describing my childhood experience in school. And I was just blown over. And so there was some grief in that. And then I went to go get my own diagnosis and all the puzzle pieces fell into place, but just it makes so much sense. And I think a lot of entrepreneurs tend to have some neurodiversity, whether we're on the autism spectrum or, have ADHD, because we're available, if you will, to catch all these moving parts and to be aware of them and somehow make it all work. Sometimes it's very messy, but it ends up working in some way. And so I just started some new medication. I'm not sure if it's helpful or not. It is in some aspects, but yeah. And I want to just really kind of point to the grief, because I think that sometimes when we get a diagnosis, we hit the ground running with solutions and therapies. But at the same time, if you need to take a moment to grieve the childhood that you didn't get because you were passed over, which often girls are, then please, be kind to yourself in that way.
I love that you share that. And I had a conversation with Tara McMullen.
I just talked to her yesterday. She's on my show. Love her.
I love it because we're all on our book podcast tours. We're doing it. I actually just got her book yesterday, What Works, which is amazing. And but just talking about ASD and just the neurology, right? Of paying attention to that, my daughter and I, highly sensitive people, all of those things to be tuned. And it's really self-awareness, right? Tuning into that piece. So I love that you're acknowledging the grief and giving yourself some space not to go into rescue, solve, resolve as quickly as possible. Change. And just feel the feelings of that. So as we wrap up, are there any last words that you would like to share or point people in direction to find your books? And also you have your How to Stop Feeling Like Shit is revised and updated once this episode goes live. Yes.
Yay. I think I feel complete. We covered so many amazing topics. I appreciate you so much as a host. And you can find me and the book at AndreaOwen.com. And then all of my social handles, I've kept it really easy for people. I'm at Hey Andrea Owen.
Love it. Love it. And love you. And I know we'll talk again soon.
All right. Bye, everybody.
Bye. Thank you so much for your heart and attention and listening to Lead with Love. You can always get the links and resources mentioned in each episode over at leadwithlovepodcast.com so that you can build a sustainable business and live a creative life on your terms. If this message, Leading with Love, resonates with you and you want to take a stand for remembering that there are humans with beating hearts behind the numbers, I would love for you to subscribe so you never miss an episode and leave an honest review. It would mean the world to me, and it also helps more people spread more love in the world, which we really, really need. I also love hearing from you. So as you're listening, take a screenshot, share your favorite takeaway, and tag me on Instagram and Facebook at Jada Selner. I really appreciate you, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye.